Well, gang, it finally happened. Your boy has been selected to serve a higher power, or a lower court. At least that's what I think these papers are referring to, doing some jury duty. Always wanted to try it. Serving a greater calling against the forces of chaos and lawlessness. Which got me thinking about other such fabled folks in my position. Those who are chosen to serve in a mission of justice and all things good. The Chosen One. Also, this cool fellow in the Discord thought it'd be neat if I talked about this, and you know what? I concur. So, The Chosen One. A narrative trope that has made its way to countless stories since as long as we've been telling each other them. The idea that a single individual can be tasked with defying the odds and defeating whatever overwhelming force is threatening their very way of life. It is a classic trope of storytelling that you can look to and find many characters who fit into this very framework. From Harry Potter to Neo to Anakin or Luke or Rey or Star Wars got a lot of these things. And I personally think the real one is Skippy the Jedi droid, but last time I went into this particular rant, my hinge date served me a restraining order. Oh, maybe that's what these papers are for. But with so many stories following this framework, I've always kind of wondered what technically counts as a chosen one to begin with. Because if all of it takes to be the chosen one is for someone else telling you, hey, you got the gig, pal, then shouldn't LinkedIn be marketing itself as Chosen One Central? I'm just kidding. You can't get a job through LinkedIn, or anywhere else for that matter. So that's what I want to dive into today. The Chosen One, not the getting a job part, despite my parents' protests. What makes a Chosen One story just that? Can I think of any cases where it's done particularly well? And what are some lesser well-executed ones that we've been subjected to? So let's convene with our nearest soothsayer and maintain a respectful 50-yard distance from a certain someone. Oh, come on, really? And let's discuss. So the Chosen One didn't just become popular for no reason. Consider the fact that with every story you tell, you've got to give your audience a reason to care about what the people in it are going through, and what's more justified of a reason than the fates themselves declaring your main character the most important person in the world. And so we get tale after tale, each one presenting us another destined hero who will fight the forces of evil or, real estate development, in order to save either the world or at least their small piece of it. These sort of stories can be rather versatile. It is a time-honored trope, so much so that even several religions have adopted key elements from it, putting together their chosen saviors. And we'll get to those aforementioned key elements in a minute, but first, I want to differentiate the Chosen One from another similarly popular storytelling device. One you might have heard of, called the underdog. And the underdog is an individual who is facing down overwhelming odds, but nevertheless is tasked with beating them. Like fighting an uphill battle against a finicky YouTube algorithm in a desperate attempt to get their thoughts and opinions out in front of more people. But I'm told it might be a little bit easier if any of you out there want to like, comment, and subscribe. Anyways, the underdog is an extremely well-known tale that I'm sure many of you have heard about before. And many Chosen One stories do follow such a character. But there are a few differences that make them unique entities. Mainly in the fact that an underdog chooses to deal with the task at hand, whereas a Chosen One is more fated to.
The problem is choice.
We'll get into the more specifics in a minute, but the basics are an underdog is someone who is unlikely to succeed, whereas the Chosen One is the only one who can possibly succeed. Not every Chosen One is an underdog, but again, there's plenty of crossover. And sifting through the numerous Chosen Ones we've been gifted throughout the millennia, things like King Arthur, Hercules, Odysseus, and SpongeBob SquarePants, I have distilled it down to 5 key traits that every Chosen One must have. And we'll start with the most important of them all, the prophecy. Yes, the prophecy is the defining trait of every Chosen One to begin with. Because after all, if there is no destiny or fate involved, then what exactly is telling us that this character is uniquely ordained to undertake such a task as, defeating whatever Dark Lord is corrupting this realm? Yeah, some kind of a fortune teller or ancient inscription or drunken ramblings need to be spewed out at some point in the story to explain that there are greater forces at work guiding our characters along this journey. There are multiple ways that they can find themselves in the middle of this, though the common one that a lot of stories fall back on is that our Chosen One is just born for the role. And from that very young age, has always been on this path, even if they didn't even know it, to complete whatever mission is set out for them. And that brings us to the next point. There must be a mission, or a stated goal that will impact and change the lives of a group of people. Which, doing the math here, comes out to about 17. Don't ask me to show my work. But yeah, if destiny and fate is calling upon this individual to be the one to rise to the occasion and do what no other could, well, then you need a route and checklist for them to go down. This can range from a quest to a specific set of instructions. Whatever labors that this character must undertake need to be spelled out to one extent or another, allowing us to chart a course and see whether or not destiny had the right person in mind to begin with. And all this is to take on what is the third key trait, a clear antagonistic force. Yeah, in order to be the chosen one, you need to be chosen to do something, and that is typically to do battle against some kind of an overwhelming force or individual seeking to do harm to this world. And because of the versatility of the chosen one, there are instances where maybe the thing that they have to take on is the moral good side, which can bring us into different variations of the chosen one, maybe a dark chosen one, stuff like that. But either way, whatever the chosen one is set to do, they need to have some kind of an opposition attempting to stop them. Often this is some kind of an oppressive regime or empire who seek to do harm to the very people our protagonist is defending. It's done even better when that larger-than-life armada has a couple of key foot soldiers that act as a representation for the substantial threat that's backing them. And I keep stating, it all comes down to this one individual, which gets me to the next key trait. There can only be one! Yet Chosen One stories are, well, called Chosen One for a reason. Having a chosen two or more is its own thing, completely unique from the idea of a sole individual being responsible for the very fate of the world they inhabit. These folks are the factor that will determine the difference between success and failure, placing the entire burden of the world on their shoulders. It's an isolating and unmatched situation, which places a tremendous amount of responsibility, and therefore pressure, on a single individual. And it's something that can't be replicated if there are others to share in this burden. Sure, the chosen one can have a friend or maybe even a fellowship, but at the end of the day, determining the difference between success and failure lands squarely on them. So yeah, the chosen one, only one. Kind of comes with the territory, wouldn't you think? And the final thing that comes with this territory is some measure of supernatural elements. Because after all, the chosen one deals with a lot of themes of fate, determinism, free will, and inhuman forces bearing down on one individual. And more often than not, the consequences of failure are beyond the imagination. Now, those supernatural elements don't have to be explicit, like we don't need everyone shooting lightning out of their fingertips or nothing like that.
Lightning bolts shoot from my fingertips!
But we need to be given some degree of evidence that there are larger forces here at play, beyond what we're seeing with our own two eyes. Things like complete coincidences working out in the protagonist's favor, or challenges appearing from nowhere that are beyond the pale, to test if our chosen one is up for the task. Things like this that might be seen as just pure luck or happenstance should also be treated with a sense of skepticism that there might be strings being pulled by figures that we just can't see. Or maybe there's just a wizard throwing some fireballs at a group of orcs. That's pretty magical too, if I do say so myself. And those are the 5 elements that every Chosen One story has to have to obtain the mantle. To repeat, that is a prophecy, a mission, a clear antagonistic force, the presence of supernatural elements, and that the story contains only a singular Chosen One. But these 5 elements together give any of you curious writers out there your own Chosen One story. Now you could list a few other superficial elements that a lot of these Chosen One stories contain, and I will right now. You know, things like a wise old mentor figure, mysterious origins, usually tied to a magical bloodline, a totem or an iconic weapon, plot armor galore to keep their asses in one piece at the end of this story, or mostly in one piece, and initial reluctance and maybe even some difficulty reconciling with their free will. You could give them a tragic backstory, and plenty more. But none of these are strictly speaking required, and more or less just set dressing to differentiate these guys from one another. Which has led to a lot of misconceptions as to who qualifies as a Chosen One at all. So let's run through a few of these guys who not only fit the mold, but I think are epitomes of this particular narrative trope itself. And one of my personal favorites comes from the series Avatar: The Last Airbender, a show that I'm sure many of you are familiar with, and if you are, then you probably also know that it doesn't necessarily reinvent the mold of the Chosen One story itself. Avatar: The Last Airbender obviously follows one of these chosen individuals, with a seemingly endless number to choose from, but for the purposes of this discussion we'll be focusing on the Last Airbender Aang, mainly for the reason that not only does he fit this Chosen One narrative to a T, but his role as the Avatar kinda allows him to double up on what he is chosen for. Because not only is Aang selected by the universe to be the peacekeeper between the 4 nations, but he also has the secondary objective to defeat the Fire Lord before the arrival of Sozin's Comet. The show utilizes the Chosen One narrative in 2 particular aspects, that being the immediate mission and the grander responsibilities that come with being the Avatar. And while most stories typically only follow one of these aspects, either the Chosen One is chosen to do a task that is extremely specific and time sensitive, or they're given a broader mission that may or may not take more than 1 lifetime. In the Avatar's case, because of the reincarnation cycle, there's always seemingly going to be a reason another Avatar is needed to pick up where the last one left off. But in Aang's specific story, he is the only one who can defeat the Fire Nation before the world is thrown into an irreversible state of unbalance. So his story is both important and, because of the expert world building, given a sense of perspective as to where it stands within the larger mythology. And it's a mythology I find extremely interesting and well fleshed out. While I don't have any real problem with the origin story of the Avatar that was given to us in the series Legends of Korra, I do think that it was kind of more interesting to have it be left a mystery within the original series as to where the Avatar comes from and how they are chosen. But whereas Avatar is a much more straightforward telling of this Chosen One tale, there also exist versions that like to put it more under a microscope and puts into perspective why this particular plotline draws so many in the first place. And a story I think does this tremendously is the Dune series. My favorite movie shot to look like a perfume commercial. Now, I personally have only seen the movies, though I do have a fair degree of secondhand knowledge of the story itself, and especially based on what I've seen so far in the theatrical adaptations, their particular chosen one is one Paul Atreides, who himself is destined to save the people of Arrakis, being a male born with the powers of the witches, the Bene Gesserit, who are also the ones who foretold this prophecy. But what makes this story different from other chosen ones, and I don't know, heads up because we might be entering some spoiler territory, is that while the Messiah figure is told to us to be the one that's going to bring liberation to this planet, this turns out to be a fabrication manufactured to create a system of control over the Fremen people. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy that the witches cobbled together to serve their own ends. And this is all done because the planet Arrakis is rich in this mineral known as spice, which is required for this galactic empire to continue to function. So Paul Atreides is actually at the heart of it, a kind of villain being Trojan horse through a chosen one narrative, using the Messiah framework to continue manipulating this poor group of people to do the bidding of this empire looking to colonize them, and putting in the stark realization humanity's struggle to deal with religious figures, and how easy it is for a group of people to fall prey to a charismatic figurehead who claims they have the best interests of their people at heart. So in a way, you could say that Paul Atreides is kind of a sinister chosen one. But those are some examples of this trope in action that I'm very fond of. And as you can see, they are unafraid to play with the convention in their own unique ways, allowing for a variety of storytelling to be on offer. Because in my opinion, the most interesting aspect of the Chosen One story is the battle between free will and determinism, and on whose authority this whole thing was constructed behind. Because that's something I noticed varies from story to story, in who's the one selecting these individuals to become their story's designated savior. Because that's another thing about the Chosen One story, which is that the narrative can be as big or as small as the writer chooses. I mean, this is the case with Charlie from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, who he himself is a kind of chosen one through the metrics of circumstances and dumb luck. And while not on a mission to necessarily save the world, he is on a quest to help this kooky old man re-obtain the joy in his never-ending mission to bring smiles to children through the power of candy. And with the storybook nature that this tale is told, you can't deny that there's plenty of supernatural elements to allow it to qualify. I mean, what the hell are the Oompa Loompas?
What the hell is even that?
And to me, the stories that handle this narrative structure the poorest are the ones that don't do anything unique with it, and take their protagonist's chosen one status as nothing more than justification for why you, the audience, should care about what's going on.
Well, I'm the captain.
And I'm the chosen one.
Oh, good for you.
Something like that movie Borderlands, which thinks it's doing something clever by misdirecting who we think the chosen one is, to me just isn't enough to make this an interesting twist. It results in the whole thing just feeling rehashed and dull. It doesn't help that the story itself is not all that well executed on any level, which further results in this feeling like a hackney recycled plot point, rather than a fun reinvention of a classic tale. There are also other bad examples where the Chosen One narrative feels kinda shoehorned in, and actually takes away a little bit from the relatability of their protagonist, which was the case with Peter Parker in the Amazing Spider-Man duology, where they leaned into the idea that Peter was always fated to become the wall crawler due to his magical bloodline, which I find to just be less interesting than some random kid just getting saddled with his burden and has to learn the lesson of responsibility to make the most out of his situation. And no, I don't really enjoy it when the comics lean into this plotline either. But all in all, that's what I have to say on the Chosen One as a storytelling device. The best of them, in my opinion, are the ones that play with your expectations, knowing what your assumptions are going in, and then challenging those assertions on what can and cannot fill this mold. Whether it be a Lego with a dream, a kid with a winning lottery ticket, or a panda ordained by a wise old turtle, when stories play with this well-worn format, it can produce many unique results. And with everything now being said, I think you can finally see that Skippy is the chosen one of the Star Wars universe. Look, he's right here. He sacrificed himself. He could see the future. Wait, hold on, turn off the music. I got more to say. Hey, thanks for watching, and if you stuck all the way to the end, why don't you check out another one of our videos on screen now. And if you want to chat directly, come join our Discord, link in the description below.